Hi, this is Monica Weston with Google Scholar. I'm very pleased to be speaking to all of you today about how to ensure that your OJS journal is as well indexed as possible in Google Scholar. I apologize that my Spanish is so poor that I will have to speak in English, but I do have slides in Spanish. Thank you very much to Andrea from CONARE for organizing this webinar, and to Andrea and Jorge from CONARE for aiding with the translation. So I will begin by describing how the Google Scholar indexing system works. I will go through some common OJS indexing errors and how to fix them. From there, I will discuss best practices for OJS journal indexing. And then before we go to questions, I'll end with some Google Scholar indexing guidelines and resources. I want to begin by describing how the Google Scholar indexing system works. The indexing system works by finding scholarly content, identifying associated metadata, and grouping different versions of items together in Google Scholar search results. To do this, first a crawler scans the entire web for scholarly items. For all of these scholarly items, the indexing system identifies suitable bibliographic metadata to display in search results, as you see below. So what does the Scholar indexing system need to find your journal articles and include them in search results? I described how it begins by crawling the web. This means that the crawler needs to be able to access all your article URLs. For most instances of OJS, this is set up by default, though I'll get into a few exceptions later. Second, in order to identify metadata for the publications it finds, the Scholar system needs access to machine-readable metadata for these items. And this machine-readable metadata used by Scholar are called meta tags. You may see them referred to as Highwire Press tags or Google Scholar tags as well. The image on the right shows a typical set of meta tags. It's taken from our inclusion guidelines, which I'll describe later and give you a link to as well. The meta tags in the green box at the top contain familiar bibliographic metadata like author name, publication date, title. The last meta tag in the red box at the bottom tells the indexing system the location of the full text version of the article. These meta tags are usually automatically included for OJS journals. You can review the meta tags for one of your articles by going to the landing page for the article, then viewing the HTML source for that page. Usually you'll do this by right-clicking on the page and selecting View Page Source, or using a keyboard command depending on your browser. Once you're on the HTML source page, which you see here at the bottom, you can search for all instances of citation underscore to see the list of meta tags. This process will be used to test and troubleshoot many of the OJS indexing errors that I will describe in the presentation. When you review the meta tags for an article, you will always want to compare them to the metadata in the PDF of the article, which is considered the version of record. So here you see an example PDF to the right of the meta tags for this article. These meta tags look really good. The publication dates, which are both in red, match. The abstract outlined here in blue is written in Portuguese. So the meta tags, especially the article title meta tag, as you'll notice, are also written in Portuguese. I'll go into detail about these best practices soon. The publication date and the article meta tags should also match the publication date for the issue in which the article is published. As you see here, Volume 13, Issue 1 of this journal was published in 2019. The Google Scholar indexing system will check to make sure that all the articles within this issue have publication dates listed with the year 2019 in their meta tags. I spent a lot of time talking about bibliographic meta tags early on because this is a very common area for errors when it comes to Scholar indexing of OJS articles. Indexing in Scholar requires accurate meta tags. Inaccurate, incorrect metadata doesn't just result in unhappy authors and items not being ranked as they should be due to missing citations. The indexing system also automatically detects sites with frequent metadata errors and is forced to stop including them. If your OJS journal site has been dropped from the Scholar Index, it may be due to frequent metadata errors. There are a few common causes beyond metadata for OJS indexing errors. This includes things like site outages and other errors that obstruct access to the crawler. I'll discuss these towards the end of my presentation. I'll turn now, though, to common indexing errors for OJS, which are almost all related to the meta tags. I'll start with the publication date. The publication date is a crucial piece of metadata for indexing scholarly articles. If the publication date in the citation date meta tag doesn't match the publication date of the issue or the publication date given in the PDF, it's a red flag for the indexing system. Here you see a typical example where this has gone wrong. And in this typical case, the publication date in the meta tag that you see, 2019, is later than the actual publication date of the item, which you see in the PDF and the breadcrumb for the article. This suggests that the date the PDF was made available online or uploaded is accidentally being listed as the publication date, which is a common type of publication date error. There's also a known bug for different versions of OJS that cause incorrect dates to be listed in the meta tags. If you're using any version of 3.0 or 2.4 of OJS and have widespread date errors in the meta tags across your site, this bug is a likely cause. So to test to see if you have this common problem, you'll review the HTML source for a number of articles across your journal and view the date meta tags for them. Compare these dates with the publication dates listed in the PDFs, as well as the publication dates for the issues in which these articles appear. So again, if the problem is widespread across your OJS site and you're using one of the OJS versions listed here in the slide, there's a patch that's been developed specifically to fix this problem. This patch will ensure that only the publication date is being used in the date meta tag. I said at the beginning of this presentation that usually meta tags are enabled by default for OJS. However, there's been a recent widespread issue for some upgrades to newer versions of OJS. In these cases, the Google Scholar plugin that creates meta tags for OJS journals was accidentally disabled during the upgrade. Even if it was enabled on the previous version, it would get dropped at the upgrade, so that meta tags were lost. If your OJS site has upgraded to any version of OJS listed here in the first bullet point, it's a good idea to check if your journals have been affected by this issue. The easiest way to check is to search for the citation title meta tag in the HTML source for a few articles in each journal that upgraded. If there's no title meta tag, you've likely been affected by this disabled plugin issue. And we have seen this for many journals, including Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America and Europe. There are a few different ways to fix this issue depending on how many OJS journals you publish. If the collection of journals on your OJS site is small enough that you're able to make a simple manual adjustment for each journal, that's probably the easiest solution. And I'll show you that process on the next slide. Otherwise, if you have so many journals on your OJS site that it will take too much time to make a change for each individual journal, you can use an SQL command to adjust your database all at once. And there's a link to the GitHub there. Finally, you can upgrade to OJS version 3.1.2 and newer, where the fix for this bug has been built in. To enable the Google Scholar plugin manually on a journal, I want to show you how to do this. Start by logging into the administrator dashboard for your journal. From the Plugins tab at the top, find the list of, quote, generic plugins, and check the Google Scholar Indexing plugin checkbox. Be sure to save your settings and repeat for every affected journal. Another really common error for OJS journals occurs when multiple languages or scripts are combined in the meta tags for a single article. This results in mixed bibliographic information, and it causes confusion both for the indexing system and for researchers who may, for example, click on a Scholar search result that seems to be an article written in a familiar language and end up on a PDF that they can't read. Similarly, using English as the default language for meta tags, regardless of the language of the full text, will also cause problems for indexing. This also results in miscitations. For the example here, likely people who cite the article will use the Portuguese title in citation. So if the meta tag is in English, this may be lost. Missing citations mean articles won't be as ranked as they should be in Google Scholar search results, and both of these result in unhappy authors. And again, this is an error that, if it is widespread enough, can force the indexing system to drop the site. The fix for both of these issues is to use the language of the full text in the PDF as a guide for the language to use in entering the metadata for a publication. Don't duplicate this information in different languages or scripts within a single field. If you have abstracts written in different languages, use the full text as a guide for meta tags. So if the full text is written in Spanish, but you have a Spanish and an English abstract, you will use Spanish meta tags only for the article. When author names and citation author meta tags don't match the author names in the published PDF, which is again the version of record, this is another red flag for the Scholar indexing system. Here in the red meta tags, you see a few different examples of common author name errors, all of which will break indexing. In the first meta tag, notice that the author's first name and last name have been inverted by putting a comma where there shouldn't be one. Or in other cases, of course, removing a comma where there should be one. In the second, we see an example of only part of the author's name being entered. And in the last example, a lowercase spelling has been used for the author's name. This also causes problems for indexing. To troubleshoot and fix, just compare the author names listed in the citation author meta tags with author names in the PDF. If you see any discrepancies, adjust the meta tags to match the format of the PDF. Keep a close eye on first name, last name format, as well as capitalization. This one is not related to meta tags, but we are seeing this increasingly. Indexing HTTPS sites requires a valid server certificate. An invalid certificate effectively blocks the crawler from accessing the site, and it forces the indexing system to remove the site from crawling entirely as a result. So your entire site can be dropped all at once. To test, you'll open the URL for an article from one of your journals in a few different browsers and see whether you see any messages about the connection not being private. If so, you will need to work with a certificate provider to resolve this issue. The Google Scholar indexing system has identified almost 150 OJS sites that have been hacked and used for commercial spamming this year. And in fact, this slide is now out of date. It's above 200 at this point. This is a big problem that we're seeing. These OJS sites often don't look hacked to journal managers, editors, and end users because articles load normally in the browser for users. However, the crawler for both Google Scholar and Google Web Search is receiving links to spammy pages instead of the journal content, and the indexing system is forced to drop these hacked sites. To test whether your site has been affected, you'll first need to emulate the crawler to see what the crawler sees by setting your user agent to Googlebot. Then you can check URLs for a selection of articles across your journals to see if they return anything other than the article page you see in the browser. Alerting your hosting provider is a good first step, as they should be able to analyze and fix any underlying security issues that are resulting in this hack being able to happen. Next, we recommend posting on the PKP community forum to share the situation with others and ask for assistance. It would be good to see if others may have had similar problems and potential solutions. So with that, I've covered a large portion of indexing errors that tend to affect OJS journals. These are all very common problems, and I really recommend you check your site to see if it's being affected. I'd like to turn now to describe some best practices for OJS journal publishing specifically that will ensure your articles are as well indexed as possible. One common question that we get about Google Scholar indexing is whether OJS journals need to register their OJS site with Google Scholar in order to be indexed. The answer is no. The Scholar crawler automatically scans the entire web for scholarly articles. It's always doing this, as I described at the beginning of my presentation. It may occasionally take a bit of time, but it will eventually find your publications. However, you can ensure that your journals are indexed as quickly and comprehensively as possible by using the standard OJS structure that the Scholar indexing system has learned to recognize over the years. So OJS does allow customizations of URL paths, and some journals have used this option. But customizing URLs makes it harder for the crawler to identify OJS-based journals, so we recommend against customizing these URLs. If your OJS site migrates to another domain or subdomain, or if articles are renumbered or given new identifiers, it's important to minimize broken links as much as possible. This means setting up redirects at the article level, not just to the new homepage. So links from the previous article URL to the new article URL. These redirects should be permanent, HTTP 301s and not 302s. Here you see an example of a well-organized site migration where the old URL for an article points to the new URL for the article on the new domain, and they've done this for the entire site, rather than just redirecting all the old article URLs to the homepage of the new site or having broken links. Another best practice during migrations is to keep the old site functional and live while the new site is being developed, to avoid interruptions in access for both researchers and the indexing system. When the new site is ready to go live, first put the article level redirects in place as I just described, then change the DNS lookup to the new server. The next couple of slides are focused on avoiding outages. Whenever your site is down, it doesn't just cause problems for researchers trying to access your publications, and of course they will end up on dead pages in search results. This also prevents the indexing system from crawling pages. In general, try to avoid keeping your site down for more than a few hours to lower the chances that the crawler will be trying to access your publications while they're inaccessible. Repeated site outages, even if only for a few hours, can obstruct indexing. And here, the image that I've included is a real example from the Google Scholar crawl logs, showing a journal site that was intermittently down over a period of days. Notice that after this happens a few times, the crawler visits the page less frequently and eventually may start to give up on indexing the site. Extended outages can lead the indexing system to believe that your site is completely inactive. If your site has been down for extended periods of time, it's possible that it has been dropped from the index entirely. And here I have an example of a site that was down for, you can see here, over 3 weeks. Before we turn to questions, I want to end by directing you to a few useful references and guidelines about Google Scholar. The first is the online documentation that we've made. If you go to scholar.google.com and click Help on the lower right corner of the page, you'll be taken to our documentation. From there, the section titled Inclusion will provide a comprehensive overview of the indexing process. It includes the example list of meta tags I showed you, along with the troubleshooting guidelines I talked about today, and there's more information as well. I also recommend a slide deck from a presentation that our founder Anurag gave at the Open Repositories Conference a few years ago. It's targeted to repository platforms, but gives good general guidelines for indexing best practices. And I think it will add some additional context to the recommendations that I've made today. Finally, the creators of OJS, Public Knowledge Project, PKP, have set up a community forum. I mentioned this before. You can post specific questions to the forum that others using the platform may have encountered. And developers working on OJS often visit this forum, so your voice will be heard. With that, we will turn to questions and I'll stop recording. I want to make sure you have my email address. If your site is not being indexed well or at all in Google Scholar, and you've gone through all of the troubleshooting guidelines that I recommended and still don't know what may be happening, please send me an email and I'll be happy to take a look at your OJS site.